Hi, everybody, and welcome, Gail. We have with us Gail Brenner. Gail is a psychologist. She's an author, and she's involved with, she's passionate about non-dual spirituality and conscious, let me just actually get your wording, embodied conscious living. Welcome, Gail.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Great. And why don't you tell everybody a little more about your work? What is non-dual spirituality? What is embodied conscious living? And how does it connect to being a psychologist?
Okay. So non-duality is the name for a spiritual teaching. It's has an ancient lineage. It comes mostly from India and the Hindu traditions. And for me, it's about complete freedom, inner freedom, which implies also outer freedom, which means free of any contracted mind patterns that most of us carry and live by. So my passion is in doing the inner work of understanding and being aware of and working with the thoughts and feelings and patterns that we hold, narratives that we tell ourselves about ourselves, mostly that we learned in childhood. So I have a strong interest in early childhood trauma, we might say, or challenges that people carry into adulthood and how to be free of them. I think of my work, just a very short version, as it's about happiness and what gets in the way of happiness.
Yeah, so it actually sounds like it's our non-dual spirituality already has a psychological leaning to it, and so it's kind of a natural fit to bring that into work as a psychologist.
It depends on who's offering it. Some people don't lean into the psychology around it. It's about the offering is about just keep coming back to awareness, stepping away from those thought patterns and not understanding them more or going into them. And I do bring that psychological aspect into it. So it's not every non-dual teacher doesn't have the same offering.
Clear. And and so tell us more about inner work versus inner freedom, and how does inner work lead us to inner freedom?
Okay. So, from my perspective, inner work is necessary for a happy and connected human life. And what I mean by inner work is we turn our attention inward, like that 180 inward toward our own thoughts and feelings and impulses and tendencies, and then ultimately behaviors that are alive in us, so that first of all we understand what's going on. Before we do this work, it's all, and this, I speak from my own experience, it's all unexamined, and life feels confusing and like, oh, these same things keep happening to me that aren't positive and don't feel good, and I don't get why this is always happening to me. And so the medicine for that is to turn our attention inward, not to try to solve the problems in the external world or with people or whatever, but to really understand, because this is the starting point, our own experience. So we really need to understand what's happening here inside with our own belief systems and perspectives so that we understand what we're projecting onto the world. And as we understand these different narratives that we hold and how we live them, we can bring our attention into the thoughts, the feelings, and really learn how to work with the emotions so that we're not projecting. So there's more of a clear path, and from where we are to the outer world, and that's where the freedom is. So what I have seen in myself and what I discover in people all the time is the more that we give our attention to what's happening inside and learn how to work with it and have a friendly relationship to what's happening inside, the power of those, the oomph comes out from those patterns. And then we're in like, oh, there's space, there's not knowing, there's creativity, there's a fresh idea. So we get out of that tunnel vision of our habits and patterns, and there's this space to open up into something fresh and new.
Mm. And like I can see, like in kind of our immediate worlds, like, you know, as my hairdresser once said, you always end up dating the same guy or whatever. Like I can see in our immediate worlds how what we do attracts what comes to us. What about like in the larger world where things are happening to a lot of us, or things are happening far away that still impact our lives, or maybe they don't impact us directly, but we're concerned about it. What, like, what benefit, or I guess I'll ask you philosophically first, like, does our inner world have an impact on those experiences? Um, yeah, does yeah, does the way we're being attract those experiences, or are they kind of a different category?
I think it's always about how we meet what's happening. So, for example, if you take something in the world like a war that's happening right now, you're going to get and you ask 10 people, you're going to get 10 responses as to how they're reacting to it. And I know in my own experience, my reaction changes depending on something I read, or I don't know how I'm feeling that day. So it's always a benefit, and helps to clarify things, to turn our attention into our own inner experience, and to meet it with love and compassion and understanding.
And so we're meeting ourselves with love, compassion, and understanding.
Yeah,
And then our ways of being have less of a tight grip on us.
exactly.
And
Yeah.
how does,
It's a process, but yes, that's where we're going with it. Yeah.
and when they have less of a tight grip on us, what does that free us up to like be and do? Like I hear that we can have less of a, I don't know, attached and anxious response, but
Mhm.
what is that? Yeah, what does that make available in who we're being and what we're able to do?
Yeah, I love that. That's it. That's an exciting question, and it's an exciting place to be, because there's the I don't know. You know, if we've been stuck in a pattern of people pleasing or withdrawing out of fear or perfectionism or whatever, and then that pattern starts to dissipate, and then we have more freedom, we don't know. You know, we're so used to being in that habit. So there's room for creativity, for maybe some wish that you had as a child, you know, that of being a certain way or doing a certain thing, that there might be more space there for juice, for that kind of innocence to come forth. So it's a place of not knowing, and so I can't say what would happen, but I do know that the field of what's possible expands tremendously when we're out of that one-way lane of our conditioned patterns.
Mm,
And then that it's how we what we experience, but it's also with the impulses of what we do. You know, so there's what we feel, what we want, what's alive in us, and we become more into our full selves. Like in childhood patterns, people, when we're caught in those, we're suppressing something of our natural self. We're suppressing our feelings, or our ability to be playful, or our wish for, you know, doing something way bigger than what we learned was possible in our childhoods. And those impulses start to have room for life and for a spark and a seed that can grow when there's not that kind of conditioning tamping it down anymore. So be on the lookout, be alert, let yourself be playful, let yourself be curious, be quiet and listen to what's coming inside. That's where those impulses are. They don't come from the mind or what someone told you about yourself or the world. We get to be very original with it within ourselves. So we need the silence to listen deeply to what appears, because it appears from let's say, beyond ourselves, the universe, whatever word you want to use for it. And when our personal attachments and stuck places are out of the way or more out of the way, we get the space to be able to listen to what's actually coming through us. And we might call it our natural path, or the possibility, and maybe even eventually in unlimited possibility.
Mm, yeah, yeah. Like that relates to a lot of the work that I do. I don't do a lot of, maybe if I'm individually coaching someone, but in my group programs, I don't do a lot of like digging into individual long-standing patterns. I do a lot more of like, let's deal with what's up right now so that you can have space to be creative. Um, but it very much resonates, when you're not automatic, you can be creative, and your intuition is going to give you some signals. Right.
And I think there's a connection here, because the childhood patterns are about, at least the way I hold it, is what's happening now. So the past, there's no past. The past is held by how we feel about it right now. It's, the actual events are gone, but it's like, what is the residue here? So it's about what's here. And maybe that means untangling a story of something that happened in the past and dealing with the feelings that originated in the past. But the reason we're doing that is because those stuck places are here now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I get that. And what is you mentioned embodied conscious living. So what's the embodied component of this?
Yes. And so for spiritual seekers, there can be the desire for awakening, knowing spiritual states, and meditation, maybe in the states that come from that. And that's all wonderful. And my interest is in, okay, so we have some understanding that everything's interconnected, or everything is love, or that we know those experiences of deep silence. That's wonderful. And we're humans in human bodies, for now anyway. And so how do we bring those insights, that deep understanding, where the rubber meets the road in the moments of our everyday life? And that's what's very exciting for me.
So embodying um, in the sense of putting into action what we see. Is that what I'm hearing?
Well, potentially. First, though, it's feeling it, it's knowing it. It's like, okay, I know that all is love, or I've had that experience. And what happens when someone cuts me off in traffic, or the checkout person is having a bad day and they're rude, or, our partner, we have some kind of, conflict around that. So that's what I love to untangle and unpack.
Yeah,
And
or
light into action, but prior to that is the understanding and the direct experience of it.
yeah, 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 and again, right? We don't just have experiences. We don't just have these little experiences. It can also be, we heard something on the news, we saw a video, uh,
Exactly.
we saw somebody killed in a horrible way, because there are a lot of videos available for that right now. Or we
Yeah.
had a conversation with, or we, saw how people voted, or what a famous person said to a reporter, or yeah, and made
And when we
reactions to that.
see, the world is a tough place right now, I think we could probably all agree on that. And we bear witness. If we're not in it, then there's lots of people who are actually experiencing very challenging things. And if we're not actually we're just experiencing the effect of it in how it impacts us, and bearing witness and letting, just noticing how we turn away, or sometimes we need to turn away for our own well-being and self-care. And then we let our hearts break, and we find that universal one heart when we just are devastated by watching something or hearing about something that it could be me there, and it's not, for whatever reason, but it could be. And just really there's a challenge there to let ourselves open to that. And, for lots of people, when we open to that, it connects to childhood trauma. And I'm sure for people experiencing these things, it's trauma. And it's, how there's just, decades and, centuries of trauma,
Generations.
some of the things happening. And so we need to include that also, and being with that. And for people who are in situations like we're in, balancing that with self-care and living those, we might call smaller moments in our life. It's, I'm just bringing it all out. There's no answer really, but it's just, an acknowledgement and a recognition of all that's happening.
Mm-hmm. Well, all, and not just all that's happening, but all that's like going on with us, right? We're reacting to what's happening now. We're reacting to things that have left a trace on us from the past. We're reacting in our way. We've got our thoughts, we've got our patterns, and we've got our bodies, and just making space for all of it.
Yes, and for any action that might arise. And I know your interest is in activism, and who knows what's going to arise. I'm curious about how you feel about this, but I feel strongly that doing this inner work is something, if you feel helpless about something like bigger in the world, this is what you can do. And when you do this inner work and you can be more present with everybody around you, and you bring more love into your actual life with the people you live with or the people you come in contact with, or, you hold that, the energy you hold when you are in an interaction, or when you're by yourself, or when you walk into a room, it all matters. And I have a passion for this inner work because I think it matters, not just because we feel better and maybe we are having more space for some, activists, what we typically call activist movement, but it's also a kind of activism to be very fierce about your own inner freedom so that you can bring that out into the world in a greater way, in whatever that happens to look like.
Yeah. So I just remembered a question I was going to ask you earlier, or at least I was going to say earlier, is Gandhi talks about inner work, right? It's one of the 3 pillars of nonviolence: inner work, positive program, and nonviolent direct action. Those are not quite the words he uses, but inner work is the word he uses, right? And I mean, there's kind of 2 angles, right? There's the self-care if you're is radical in a culture that makes us machines, right? And yeah, if you come into a situation and you've got the spaciousness, all the things you can provide. I even remember when I was in the Occupy Wall Street movement, my ex-girlfriend was part of an encampment that was getting evicted. They knew they were going to get evicted. We slept at home, slept late, had a good breakfast, got there late, and we were able to contribute things that people who had slept in the camp and made, barricades and were on high alert, things they weren't able to provide because they had already spent their energy. So in the same way, if you're the person who's dealing with your overwhelming grief, outrage, anxiety, whatever's coming up, if you are, safe enough to do that, and then you come into a situation where things need to be done, yeah, you do. You can provide the calm thoughtfulness, responsiveness, and intentionality that some people may not be able to if they're burnt out or on the edge of burnout.
Right. And some people are fixers, doers, take care of others and avoiding the inner self-care that's needed. And, for me, I don't know if I would call it healthy activism or true activism. It comes from a place of love and fullness. And it's just a natural movement of life that wants to help or support or whatever it happens to look like. And it comes from that place of fullness rather than depletion, which can
Mhm.
happen in people who are, are oriented toward doing good. There's nothing wrong with doing good is wonderful, but the question is where it comes from inside.
Yeah. And I think the other thing Gandhi would say, and I don't even, I don't think Gandhi necessarily was coming from a context of self-care. I think that's very modern
Mm-hmm.
and Western. And when you do the inner work, your intentions can be pure, right? You're not bringing um, a lot of ego motivations, right?
That's
If you're not coming from let's destroy, you're not coming from let me look good, you right? Or I'm going to show this one or that one. I actually just read a fictionalized account of a mythical character. I just read the Song of Achilles, and it talks about how Achilles
that
becomes
book.
more and more ego driven, and and his actions stop being aligned to his purpose.
Mhm.
And that can, that can happen to those of us who are warriors without spears. It can still happen to us, right? If we're
Right.
not if we're not
So purpose is tricky, it's like, and you really like got really clear about it. Ego driven or love driven or wholeness driven or just movement that happens through the vehicle of this human body.
mm,
And it's aligned. It's not separate. It's not fixing. It's not, supporting ourselves in some way. It's just a natural movement that's emerging.
mm, yeah. So what I'm hearing is we can be driven from our own ego. We can be driven by love that is sourced from us, and we can be driven by allowing the flow of the universe to act through us.
Absolutely.
Great.
Mhm.
And we've sort of talked around this, but ask the question really directly. If somebody wants to have an impact on the world and they're confused about where to start or how to do it, how would you advise them to find their direction?
That confusion, that's beautiful. It's a beautiful starting. I don't know. I'm confused. And also in that question is, I want to know something that I don't know yet, which is also beautiful. So, my advice would be to turn. I'm not sure how you mean this question exactly, but it's to turn inward and start to take a look at what is arising in you. Sit quietly. What are the feelings that you feel? I can say from my own experience, in my first long meditation retreat, I couldn't believe what I found in here. I was out there doing stuff in the world. I don't even know what I was doing, but I had no idea the thoughts and the feelings and the belief systems and the judgments. There was a lot of judgment in here that was going on, and that was all motivating me out in the world. And I wasn't in a very good place in my life. And starting to reflect inward, like, whoa, there was so much in there that needed my attention. So turn inward that one, and I go this at 180 with your attention inward. Like, what are you feeling? What's happening in your body? What are the thought patterns, the common thought patterns that come around in your mind? And lots of people are thinkers. There's a lot of thinking going on, like, oh, just let that be and just get curious. What are the emotions here? Maybe there's a lot of fear. Maybe there's grieving. Maybe there's sadness. And all of that needs attention.
Mm. And I also was kind of intrigued with like the confusion.
Mhm.
Like, what can confusion tell you? What are you
Yeah.
confused about? Because sometimes confusion means you know this, but you know this. How can they go together? And if you look at them separately, it's a lot less confusing. And
Yes.
there's the wanting to know. Like, why do you want to know? What would knowing provide you? What is not knowing doing to you? Um, and like kind of disentangling a lot of these, right, knotted up things, um, so that they can each express themselves. Yeah, that's, yeah, I like that. I mean, you didn't say it, you said it without saying it, but like, that's what I saw in what you
Yes.
shared. Like, confusion is great, wanting to know is great. And we, you know, we usually make them wrong. And what if they're not wrong? What if they're a message or a bunch of messages?
A lot of people have confusion, or they about their purpose, or they don't like, what's my purpose? I want to know my purpose. Continuing to ask that question isn't going to show you the answer to your purpose. You have to let the question go. And
Mm,
as my view would be, do the inner work, and then let's see what emerges. Let yourself be confused, and then get curious about the confusion. And that's a good starting place. It'll take you deeper, I promise.
mm,
Yeah. And then the it'll emerge, and the energy for what needs to happen will emerge with it.
mhm, mm. Yeah. And sometimes the answer just isn't there yet, right? Because maybe your purpose doesn't exist until next week or next year.
There are fallow periods in life where it might be depressing or blank or blah, or I don't know. There are seeds there, even in those times when it doesn't feel like there's a seed of anything going on. There, for just in normal human life, there can be a period of a lot of loss. You lose a relationship, you lose money, you lose home, you lose whatever, you lose your job. And it's like, wow, what is this about? And even whatever is happening can be our teacher, right? So there are these seeds always there, and sometimes it takes a while for their time to ripen, and it requires patience and care and self-love.
Mm, thank you. Well, Gail, we're getting close to the end of our time together. So will you share with our audience about the free gift you're offering them?
Yes, it's some guided meditations, and they are about direction into some inner curiosity. So I'm
Mm,
happy to share those. Yeah.
great, great. And anything else? Anything else? Any final words? Anything else that you
I
want
want
to?
to share that I do send a newsletter out every Friday called Friday Inspiration, and there's some kind of, I love to write, so there's some kind of teaching or something I'm interested in right then, or so people are welcome to come and join my mailing list, and I offer group events as well.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Well, Gail, this was a great conversation.
Yeah.
I learned a lot.
Mhm.
Um, I hopefully everybody watching learned a lot. And yeah, thank you for your wisdom.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for this as well. I enjoyed it.